Well, thank you again for this invitation. And Eric, I made a few changes in the presentation, so I'll make a PDF right after we're done, so you have the update. And my name is Silvia Nogueron Lu. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. And I've been, for the past 4 years, I've been working with immigrant families here from Spanish-speaking countries. And the research that I do is related to how they can use digital resources to support their everyday tasks, but also their communication with schools and just family literacy practices with their children who are growing up bilingual. Before I came to Georgia, I lived in Arizona for 7 years. I'm Mexican, grew up close to the border, and my dissertation work also dealt with adult immigrants learning how to use digital resources for various purposes in the Phoenix area. So I've worked in the Southwest and I've worked here in a new migration context. I'm not familiar with the context in New Jersey, but if you're working with culturally, linguistically diverse communities, I hope that this is a resource that you can find useful. And so the objectives, let me switch slides. It's taking a while. What I hope to accomplish today is that we discuss criteria to evaluate digital resources for adult and family literacy. And in the classes that I teach here, I work with elementary teachers, pre-service teachers, and we're always wondering how we're going to evaluate apps and websites. It seems like there's so much coming at us, new tools, new platforms, and we have to be very critical of what these things can do for us and how students are going to actually engage with these resources and what obstacles will they face, what are design features that could be changed or that we need to explicitly teach so people can succeed engaging with digital resources independently. I'm going to show you a few examples of websites that I have used with immigrant parents, and I just invite you to consider access, both at home, work, or school environments, language, and design issues in the adoption of digital resources for adult immigrant education. So if I go to the next slide, and just a little bit of theory of the frameworks that inform my work. I work in the area of family literacy, and what I've noticed is that and so many of the programs are coming from a perspective of we're looking at what parents, or especially immigrant parents, don't have. What is it that we need to teach them? What is it that they need to learn? So for the community here in Georgia, it's a very new community. We have probably 20 years of immigration flows coming from Spanish-speaking countries. So it's still a new community in very scattered parts of the state. So it's new for the schools and for the teachers to deal with parents who don't speak English. So there's a lot of focus on how can we increase our test scores and also teach parents things that they don't know. But as there's approaches that are a response to these deficit perspectives, thinking about, well, what do they know? What are the resources that they bring, their cultural and linguistic resources, but also that critical perspective and participatory perspective of let's work together with parents, let's work together with adult learners and figure this out together. And I add a critical ethnography lens because we want to acknowledge that there are cultural and linguistic differences, but also these differences are framed in a way that people are positioned in disadvantaged roles. So we want to work together to say, well, we have a voice, we have something to say, and I believe that digital resources are a good mediating tool to help making parents' voices visible. Which takes me to my next slide.
Can you go back to the previous slide? So just for people who are clear, so I think it's important to point out that what Sylvia is saying, below where it says critical ethnography, the PAR, so that participatory action approach, right? So that the idea that you're not doing research on somebody or research to somebody, but you're doing research with somebody. So you're partners. So you're not, bringing knowledge to the parents or teaching the parents. You're working together with the parents to understand what's going on.
Oh, and thank you so much for bringing that up, because yes, coming to Georgia, it was so different from what I had seen in Arizona, with being the schools and the challenges that both schools, the teachers and the parents face. So it was coming in and saying, okay, what can we do together? How can we get there? What do you need? So it wasn't me coming in and saying, oh, well, I have all these answers, or let me just gather data from you, but working together to figure these problems out. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yep.
And I'll go to the next slide. So in a similar arrangement, I have just this idea of thinking about technology from a very critical perspective, because on the left, you see very broad ideas about, well, again, these people don't have a device or don't have internet, or because they don't have enough money or they don't have enough education, they don't have the same access than everybody else. So that's a very, I guess, a perspective that aligns with the deficit model, that they don't have these things, so they can't engage in meaningful practices. And the opposite of that is what Warshauer calls the technological determinism. Oh, if we give them iPhones, if everybody has a computer, then all the problems are going to be solved. Like the minute we put a computer lab in the classroom, everybody's going to have everything they need. So I question those two ideas, because it's not just saying, well, these people don't have anything and hence they can't learn, but also having the devices or the internet or the connectivity is not going to solve problems automatically. So on the right side is the same idea of thinking about culture and thinking about critical work with the communities. So I consider that digital literacies are culturally and socially situated. So the way I think about my iPhone is not the same way that somebody from a different context or with different needs will use the device. So something I want you to think is how Apple devices are usually designed to have one user. It's very hard to share files, or if you plug your iPhone to a second laptop, it will tell you, no, you already synced that in one iMac, and you can put it in multiple computers. So there's this design idea that there's going to be one user, one person who has all these devices, and that's kind of like bias, culturally biased. So different people from different communities or different social classes will share devices, and it's not going to be, oh, this is just mine. No, this phone belongs to everybody. So that's what I want us to think about digital literacy as shaped by cultural practices. And again, thinking about how can we engage in critical digital literacy, which is not just using the device in culturally appropriate ways, but also using our digital resources to change something, to enact change, but also being critical of the devices, like I just did with the phone. It's not just, oh, this phone is great and it's going to solve all our problems, but this phone and this interface is designed with somebody in mind, and that somebody may not be just like me, and it might not fit my needs, but I'm being told that this is what I need. So I want people to engage in critical analysis of platforms, websites, apps, and think, okay, how can I make this work for me? And what do I need to do? And is it appropriate that somebody tells me this is right for me? This is the app or the website or the phone that I need.
I think, Sylvia, I think the point that you're making about the kind of shared nature of technology is a really important one. And I think it's something that people working in adult literacy programs have long known, but maybe not realized it in a certain way, right? Because any of you who are on here who have ever had to call a learner or a student, oftentimes, you will have one phone number that goes to 4 or 5 different families, right? Because in the past, there would be, one person that had the phone number, and that would be the contact information for lots and lots of different people. So even a phone was a communally shared resource, right? And so it's not a big shift to think about technology in a similar way, that it's not just one person's piece of property, but it's a communal property. And we've seen that in the past with things like phones.
Exactly. And what it means when in an academic environment, especially with children, there's the expectation now, the schools I'm working with, they say, well, we have one child, one device, and the device goes home, and the school is saying, hey, the child owns the device and only that child can use that laptop. And what is the cultural dissonance when you're in a community where, well, no, we share all our things, you know, we have a phone that works for everybody, and then families share devices, or when the device doesn't work, you ask somebody for help. So this is definitely something that as schools are becoming more and more integrating technology and having personal devices for children and personal tracking of what children do, then this becomes another thing we have to address in family literacy. So I move my questions to the next slide just to hear from you if there are any challenges that you see adopting technology in adult literacy education, especially with, I mean, even if you're not working with ELLs or people in ESOL programs, any challenges you see, and also some advantages, some good things that you have noticed. If you're already using technology in certain ways, what are some of the good things that you see? So challenges and advantages.
Okay, thanks. And so you can either type your thoughts in that question area, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can give your response that way. So, you really have a couple of different ways of responding. And as your responses come in, I'll share them and read them with Sylvia, and so that way everybody can hear them. And for those of you that have just joined us, there's a couple of people that joined us not at the top of the hour. So to communicate with Sylvia or myself, you can either raise your virtual hand and I can unmute you, or you can type in the question area. Okay, so Carrie, you wanted to say something? Carrie, you there? This always feels like talk radio.
Yeah, I know.
So Dina says that one of the challenges is having the resources to provide the technology to students. Yeah, Melissa kind of seconds that, access to the devices, even if they're going to share them with each other, to kind of have there. And Dina points out that being in a nonprofit, the budget sometimes is limited, and so you're not able to access and get some of those resources. And I think following up on both Dina and Melissa's point, sometimes you'll get mandates from the top saying, oh, you need to include technology, or you should include technology, but there's not necessarily a line item in the funding for the technology. They just kind of imagine that you're going to make it happen without necessarily any support for that.
And that's a challenge we faced in the program I'm going to discuss, because we had the devices, but the internet connectivity was always was not very consistent. So I think when the kids in a neighboring high school started class at 9, all of our computers, like, I don't know what happened, that they just disconnected. So there were issues that every time we just had to work around. It feels like strategizing with the resources you get, because it's complicated, especially like you mentioned, when you're working in a nonprofit, or the devices are obsolete, or internet connectivity is very limited. Right.
Dina also points out that teachers need to be trained, how to use it, and not just kind of give it to them, and that students may not have the same internet access at home or access to the device. So you can imagine, in a class, you're working on a particular thing, or even if you want to save something on a Google Doc, then students don't have access to it. Linda points out there's no time to teach basic typing skills, right? So they're using Rosetta Stone, but typing skills is not something that they've necessarily done before. But Melissa points out an advantage, that the volunteer tutors have brought their devices to the classes and used them to the students to show how they can access things at home or at the public library, right? So I think taking advantage of the resources that are out there, something like the library, is great. It's a resource if you know that it's there.
Exactly.
All right, so those are some good thoughts.
Okay, so you want me to move on?
Sure.
Or
yep.
comment?
Yeah.
And I made some notes here about teacher training and typing, because it's definitely a challenge. And I'm working with Spanish speakers, so the writing system is similar, but I'm still trying to figure out what happens when the writing system is very different. And I'll show you an example of that. So the school that I worked in an elementary school with a very high Latino population, and then we designed the program together to work with digital literacy with parents. And the issue they faced was that most of the caregivers are Spanish dominant and the faculty is English dominant, and the school was hoping we could help improve school-home communication, increase parent participation, and also that parents could understand educational resources and standards. Because one of the shifts I noticed in my time there was that a lot of the information was being sent online. There was a lot of handouts being sent in the Thursday agenda, but some of the resources for kids to work at home were online, and parents were told, well, here's the password and here's your child's username, and we're hoping that he can work on these skills at home in this website. So for parents, this was an additional challenge, thinking, okay, I have to read to my child, and now they have to access this website. So hold on, let me just see if I can, I'll tell you a little bit about the program before getting to the next question. So we had a clase de computación, a computer class for 2 academic years, and the parents attended the class at the school, during the fall and the spring, and then I continued some of this work in a community library, just to address some of the resources that may not be present in certain settings, but the library supported us with internet access, and I had a small grant where I could bring some devices, and something I planned ahead was that these laptops could have a numeric keyboard so people could add accents or Spanish characters, and that it would be wide enough. So for people who are new to a device or to a computer, it's just a lot easier when they have a big screen and a large keyboard. So I didn't have like small computers. All of the parents who attended were Spanish dominant, and I asked the teachers, so what are the skills that you're hoping that the parents will explore, or the websites and resources you want the parents to explore? And so I got feedback from the teachers, feedback from the family specialist, and then the parents took surveys at every semester and just shared at the beginning. We made lists of what is it that you want to do, what is it that you need, what is it that you're curious about, what do you already know. And there were different ranges of expertise with the parents that attended frequently. Some people didn't know how to type, like you mentioned some of you mentioned in the comments that it was the first time they used a keyboard, first time they used a mouse. I also got with the grant some wireless mice or mouse devices, because the little bar that you use with your finger in a laptop was very complicated for some of them. So just hardware interface issues were a problem for people who were new to computers. And in the first semester, we just went over those basic skills of navigation, the Windows interface. Everybody got a Gmail, and then we got into more specific sites, such as media production, of reading books online with their children, but also parents creating documents that they wanted to share with their children, such as digital books. They reviewed books that were available online and available in the school library. And then in the second year, we work more with district resources, because the district launched this huge one-on-one technology initiative, so they had a lot of resources online for the children to explore. And then the children were also using Google Drive in the classroom, and they were expected to access their Google Drive at home. And the website used a tool called Symbaloo that looks kind of like an iPad interface with different icons in boxes that contain resources that children and parents could explore. So the media specialist helped us a lot, just telling us this is what the children are doing, and we're hoping that the parents can explore these resources together. And part of what we did was not just look at this website, this is what it does, or look at this website, this is what this means in Spanish, but parents actually developing criteria to assess these resources and thinking, well, is this something that is going to work for you? Why or why not? And are you going to be able to access this in your phone? And I'll show you the criteria that we developed and the parents had some input in. But before, I guess, we move on to that, I just had another question on just websites that you believe or that you use already, or even things that happen every day that you think could be helped with technology. And these questions are similar to what I discussed with parents. I asked them, so what websites do you use? And most people mentioned Facebook, if they had access to that, or YouTube. But they were curious about specific transactions like buying a plane ticket for a relative or paying bills, things they had heard that they could do in the internet, but they didn't know how to do themselves. So I'm just opening it up if there's any particular either websites or transactions that you think are relevant to include in your classroom.
Yeah, and again, you could either raise your hand or type the questions in there. I think the second question is really crucial, right, Sylvia? Mm-hmm. The idea that rather than making assumptions about what learners need, you talk to the learners about what they're doing with technology in their own lives. Oftentimes you see kind of technology modules for adults, and they're horribly out of date already, mm-hmm. right? They're having students do things that learners don't do anymore, with their technology in their own lives. So starting with them, talking to them about how they use technology in their own life, that's how you start to build the curriculum, which is what you did, rather than making kind of assumptions. Yes. Janice points out that the elcivics.com is a good site, right? Mm-hmm. So that's that government sponsored one about ELCivics and ESL and citizenship. Dina says www.headsupenglish.com for reading and learning. Okay. And again, we'll be collecting these sites, and so when you get the certificate of participation, you'll get these as well. So elcivics.com, heads up English. And then are there things that your learners, Sylvia has asked, are there things that your learners have also asked you to teach and work on in the class, in addition to the websites?
And I think one of the challenges in the second question is that technology is such a moving target. Right. So when you mentioned that the modules were out of date, so things we could do in a particular website 5 years ago, now you do them differently, or you go to a different type of site, right. Or people don't, I mean, people use listservs, email listservs, and now the district has a Facebook page and a Twitter page and a right. YouTube channel. So the parents not only have to get an email to sign up for the listserv and then to get text messages, but now there's all these platforms. Right. So parents hear about things and they get a sense of, well, I need to learn, like I learned you can get your Medicare benefits, or you can buy things online. So where do I go? And then we have to figure it out together, because sometimes I don't know, because I don't engage in the same type of shopping experiences or apply for the same services. So it is a moving target. And then the other problem we have is when the government agency decides to upgrade the site, then everything looks different. Right. And then you have to start over with them. Right. And say like, oh no.
Jason points out that students always ask to practice job interview strategies and questions. Yeah, and I think that's true not only face-to-face, Jason, right? But nowadays, if you're applying for a job, oftentimes you're applying online. You have to go online and fill out a form online. Helene says Facebook. Students want to talk about Facebook, but they also work with Duolingo. So it'd be nice to go from English to Spanish rather than the way that it is set up now, because Duolingo is really set up for other people to learn languages, not English. Dina says that students really appreciate vocab studies. So with phonics, word roll, sentence use, so high frequency words on the Fry word list and that kind of practice. And write a resume. So she mentions careeronestop.org as another website.
One Stop. Oh, that's wonderful.
Great.
And that shows you just a wide range of both practices related to job interviews, applying for jobs, that social networking, and the language learning component with Duolingo. And I've sat with people going through Duolingo in the app and in the phone and in the computer, and it's very interesting how they design it, because it's a lot of translating that happens. And then if you're not very sure how to type, that's when errors are introduced. So I see the challenges there.
Right. Great.
Okay, so should I move on
to
the next slide?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So we went over this. So this is a criteria that I kind of outlined based on what I saw or what I observed with these parents. And then I think the next one I have another slide where I tell you what the parents said when they were looking at resources. And again, this is in the context of family literacy, thinking about websites that parents can use with their children. So this is the first bullet point, is a trend that we have seen in large data reports, but also that I've seen in the community I work with, that mostly people will access the internet through mobile devices. And this is a very high percentage. And the community I'm working with, paying for a bill to have your internet in your house is one more bill, and many people are now willing to spend that amount of money. I work with a community that's pretty they all live in a mobile home community. So mobile devices are very ubiquitous. Almost everybody has a data plan. Or like I said, they share the phone. So somebody has an iPhone and people leave the iPhone at home. If the husband goes to work, then the mother keeps it and she has access to internet there. But it's rare, or a family has to be a little bit more established with their bills and their work situation to have another bill for the internet. So something I wonder, and we discuss, is, can this website be accessed through a smartphone, an iPhone, or an Android device? And then the second and third have to deal with language. So we want to think, well, is the website in English or Spanish? But there's another layer of, is the content of the language in English or Spanish, and is the language of the interface, can it be customized? And when I say the interface, is just the navigation panels in a site, can they be changed to another language? Because if it's still in English, people will struggle. And we notice this with the district and the school websites, because they're in English and there's some content that it's in Spanish, but it's hard to find if the home page it's in the English language, because then you have to understand what the top menu titles mean. And we've tried using Google Translate, and we tried, but even the translation sometimes is not very clear. So something I always look for is, can we customize the interface to Spanish or to any other language? And then looking at the content, is the content translated, or was it produced with a Latino audience in mind? So it's very different if it's just a very literal translation of what was composed in English, and then whether it was actually written for a Hispanic community or Hispanic users. Then the fourth bullet is the graphic user interface, and these are the icons or the pictures that show up. Do they make sense? But do they make sense for whom? So I always give the example of the home icon in your internet browser, because the home icon is based on the English language, on the metaphor of going home. But when you translate it to Spanish, it doesn't make sense. It's just casa, and then you have to think a little bit more, okay, what does this really mean? And actually the home page in Spanish is called página principal, which is main page. So the translation of that icon doesn't really translate well to Spanish. So it's interesting to think about how much of these graphic icons are actually based on things that we think about in the English language, or that you have to have a certain knowledge. Like, for example, settings is usually a gear or something that looks like a gear, and that, if you're not familiar with what a gear does, then it's going to be hard for you to realize, okay, what is this? This is where you go to change the settings in your phone or to change the settings of your browser. So those icons are not always very transparent. And then for the case of family literacy, these parents are expected to work with their kids and help them log into websites and put their passwords. So the children are expected to use a website. I also explore, well, how much help will the child actually need? Do the parents need to help? Is the website for the child in Spanish? Can parents and kids collaborate and figure it out? Because that's usually what happens, that children and parents are working together, because the content will usually be in English and the children are more proficient. But then we also look at, can the child work independently with the site, or do they really need the parent to come in and help them type something and find the page where they have to go? And I'll move on to the next slide unless there's any question about this.
Nope, not so far. I think it's good.
Okay, so let me see if I can show you because I want to show you the criteria from parents. So when parents actually explore these websites, these are some of the ideas that we were looking for. Websites for children. What was the age level? How old the children need to be to use a website? Many parents were very, very interested in having free content. So if a site had a password or they had to pay for an app, it was like, no, I want to find something that's free. Parents also noticed, like Veronica here, she was worried that not every parent has access to a computer, so she was thinking about people that she knew, because she had internet at her home. Not every parent will have this information accessible, so she was also looking at things that would be easier to access or that could be downloaded if you don't have internet, that you don't need to be relying on your data, but this is something that you can actually just download and have. What were the subject areas that were supported, and what were the pros and cons? So these are, again, some of the criteria that parents brainstormed. And I guess I'll just show you an example of a website, because this is something you can think about while I talk through the sites, because I know we're running out of time. Oh no, it's 3:35. Okay, so I'm going to show a couple of websites, and I share with you some criteria bullet points, but I want you to think if there's additional criteria that you would consider important to evaluate a website. For example, is it free, that you don't need a password? So as I talk you through how we assess the websites, I would be curious to know, like, what is, out of the criteria that I presented, if there's one or two that you think, oh, this is very important. Like, I wouldn't use a website unless it was free, or I wouldn't use a website unless it had a Spanish translation. So, and you'll have access to the criteria from the PowerPoint PDF.
And as Sylvia's going through this, you can just send your ideas as they come to you via the question area. You don't have to wait till the end. So as she's walking through, something strikes you, send it along via the question section.
So these two websites are examples of what I said when I explained the language of the interface and the language of the content. The first one is International Children's Digital Library, and I'll go over this again in an internet browser. But here you can see how the headings of the website are in Spanish, and there's different subheadings with the English, Spanish, Francois, and then 2 other languages that I don't know. So these actual subheadings mean that you can change the language of the interface. You can change how you navigate the sites. And then where you can see the book in the middle, it says read books. That's where you actually access the content. But that website, both the interface and the content are multilingual. And the other example is just Google Drive. And actually, Google has been pretty good at being very responsive to language differences and people who go back and forth. So here you can see how all the tools for Google Drive are in Spanish, and they can be translated to other languages. But because the children were using Microsoft Office in school, it was very helpful for parents to actually see the commands and the different functions in their home language as opposed to learning it because a challenge I found in Phoenix was that the computers in the university or anywhere had Microsoft installed in English. So it was another step for people to figure out, okay, what is file, what is save as, what is copy, what is paste. But if you're using Google Drive, you can change that interface to any, there's so many languages, and that makes it a lot easier to work in media production. So these are, again, 2 examples of interfaces that are translated to many languages. So let me just get out of here.
Well, as part of that,
show you the website.
As part of that, Jason was pointing out that this issue of navigating is really an important criteria. How easy is it to navigate the site?
Yes, because it's, like I said, some of the content is intuitive, but intuitive for whom? So ease of navigation is so crucial. And this is a good example, actually. Can you see so Eric, is my browser showing?
Yep.
Okay, so everything I see, everybody can see.
Yeah.
So okay, I'll just move this because this is, I don't know how to make this full screen. So Colorín Colorado, and this is going to be in the PowerPoint. It's a website that is bilingual, and it's a good example of navigation is in English and Spanish. So you have English content and you have Spanish content in parallel tabs, but also the content is specifically written for Spanish speakers. Actually, the table of contents are not parallel. The content that you see in English is going to be different from the content that you'll see in Spanish, because it's, and then the language, the jargon, because there's a lot of description of academic practices. It's very well geared towards Spanish readers or parents who are interested and who are not educators, whereas the English content is clearly targeted to educators, administrators, librarians, so you will see a different almost genre of the way things are presented and written versus the Spanish side that will have some information for teachers, for bilingual teachers, but also a lot of printing guides, and I think some of the guides are in other languages, not just Spanish, but the content is mostly geared to bilingual Spanish-English resources, a lot of multimedia content. But based on the comment I heard, navigation was very challenging for the parents I work with. It was hard for them to get there and then go between the 2 bars and then going, for example, we wanted to find books, recommendations of books for the children on different topics, and there's subheadings, and the subheadings are look at all these different topics, and then there's subheadings under each thing. So maybe because the content has increased so much, they just have, they have a lot of information. So for the parents to find, okay, where was the information about the book Tomás and the Library Lady, and for us to go again and find it, it was a challenge, just because the content was so much. It's just been a website that has been on for a long time, and it keeps getting updated. So that's probably one of the difficulties that the parents found, that it was hard for them to locate content and for some of them even read in the screen, because there was a lot of information. Some of the articles are longer than others. So what I used the most was the printed guides. There's guías para imprimir, and those are in English too, that are PDFs, and the parents like those better because they're like a flyer, and they're self-contained, and you can focus on only one piece of information as opposed to browsing an entire encyclopedia of resources to teach your child how to read or to help your child how to read. So this is one resource, again, where the content and the interface are very culturally relevant and linguistically relevant, but the organization is a bit of overwhelming. Then another resource parents were curious about was just how to apply for support with food. This is, I guess, the how to apply for food stamps. So some of them had heard that you could do this online, and when you actually went to the office, there were computers and you could sit with somebody, and then so we have icons, and then we have, and in the first line you can see the Spanish translation. So to see this website in Spanish, click here, and then oh no, and I click, oh, this was working before, because all of this homepage, okay, here it is translated to Spanish, and we have some support for people who need help actually sitting through the application. And what I noticed that people struggle with was when they got to creating an account. And I'm sure this is something that many of you have faced. Whenever you have to create, oh, see, I'm already stuck here. When you have to create an account and you have to enter information and you have to remember your password, that's when people could get stuck. Because they said, well, the last time I came here, somebody helped me, and somebody wrote the password for me, and somebody created a username for me. So what I've noticed, and this is a very recurrent theme, is that people don't create accounts by themselves. They get the help from a nephew or a son or somebody younger or somebody at an agency. They write the password and the username in a little paper, and then they don't have that with them when they come to you or when they come to class, and they forgot, so they have to go through a process of retrieving a password. And then, obviously here you're asked for your social security number, which is information that many of the people I work with do not have. So online forms have already many layers of issues or obstacles that people face, but when you add the language and then the online environment and then the fact that you have to remember a username and a password, this becomes a very burdensome task. So working with these parents and these families, I noticed that how important it was just to have that information on an index card or a notebook somewhere, but because they were not using it on a very constant basis, they didn't remember it, or they relied on somebody else to remember or have that information for them.
And Sylvia, I think this is also an important point to reemphasize the idea that it's cultural practices, because if you look on that form, it has the social security, but it's not required, right? The date of birth is required. And so a student may think, okay, well, it's on the form, so therefore I have to put something there, and then if I can't move forward and not be able to see, oh no, it's actually this birth date that I have to put in. And sometimes people don't understand when they have the right not to put information in online, or even dealing in stores. Like I remember doing a workshop and telling somebody, when the cashier asks for your zip code, you can say, no thanks. And they're like, you can? It's like, yes, of course you can say no thanks. You don't want to give them your zip code, And so if you don't understand these different cultural practices around privacy and around sharing information, then it can be very frustrating and difficult for students.
Exactly. And then there's always that issue of, well, I don't want to put my information online, like almost like this surveillance concern.
Yes.
That because people are not sure how Facebook works or how Gmail works. Even a mother I work with said, well, my husband doesn't trust Google. He thinks once you put something there, everybody will know about it. And then we're super concerned. We don't want people to know where we are. We don't want to be seen. So this visibility fear, knowing that we when I pay my bills, I pay them on somebody else's name, and then Google or these forms are very intrusive. They want to know. I mean, they collect a lot of information, and like you said, not all of it is necessary. Or even going shopping and being asked, well, give me your email so you can get coupons.
Right.
Well, no, you don't have to do that. Just say no, thank you. So it's that critical perspective. Okay, so this was, and there were several forms like this that we explored together for medical, over-the-counter resources that people had a right to receive. We were also able to shop for this online, but username and passwords were a bit of a nightmare. This is a site I really like because you don't need a password, so that was one of the things that I really appreciated, that in order to browse and use the content, I do not have to log in with my username. And actually, the school recommended this site. So the language of the interface can be changed to all these different languages, I think. So if I do Chinese simplified, there you go. So you have your interface in a different writing system, and you can change this. I really like when websites have these drop menus, and Google has the same thing. You can change the language of the interface easily. Oh, now I don't know how to go back to Spanish. Great. So you can create a password, and that way you can create a bookshelves of the books you want to read, but that's not required. So once you go and start browsing books, I'm going to go back because I don't know this language. Let's see, language Spanish. You can search, you change your interface, and then you can look for books in any language or any, so the content is in different languages as well. So you can find even some Quechua, some indigenous languages here. So if I go to Spanish, oh, it's in Español, then it'll show me, it'll filter the titles by language. And something interesting is that the books, these are children's books. There are books that were written maybe in Croatia, but have been translated to Spanish. So the content I see is not just Mexican or Nicaraguan books, but books that were published in other countries. So the parents really like the idea of being able to find books that they had read as children, because some parents were able to find authors or poetry from their nation states because it's an international library, but they also thought it was interesting to read books from other countries that were not the United States. So reading books from Spain, reading books about indigenous languages in other countries, not just Mexico, was something that they found very appealing. So these books are scanned. So some of the issues with that is that it's not a real ebook, it's just the scan of a book. And when parents were browsing this website, they haven't dealt with a digital document before. So they are not using PDFs for works or for school. So a PDF or a digital page is something challenging. So just becoming familiar with the layout. Okay, so many of the questions were, well, how do I get closer? How do I make it bigger? How do I go to the next page? So I had to show them the concepts of screen of, okay, here this arrow will take you to the next page. And then when you click, it tells you, okay, here you can make the font larger and you can actually read the content. But this required a lot of scaffolding and people working together around each other's screen, figuring out how to go back, how to go forward, and then they would see each other's screens and say, where's that book? I want to read the book you're reading. So they really had I mean, they were very invested in finding the content, but if you think about this interface as being child-friendly because it was designed for children, it was actually not so friendly for somebody who doesn't know how to use a PDF document or just how to go back and forth in a screen. And then just knowing what zooming does, zooming in, zooming out, and you can see those icons here. And we're familiar with them. But for parents or for people who don't use these devices for work, this is very new information, just becoming familiar with the zooming features of this very basic interface. So again, even after the workshop was over, I could hear some of the participants saying, oh, to other parents, this is a really good website. And they have an app, but the app is only for English content. I haven't seen the app for Spanish content yet. So if you really want the multilingual, multicultural access, you have to do it in a computer. And I guess I'll go over, oh my God, it's 3:50. Okay, so should I do one more website, Eric?
Sure.
Or should I just
maybe one more and then, oh no, I think since it's 10 of, why don't you move forward then, yeah.
Okay, and I have the websites here. So they're in the okay, and I also use the translation tools. Let me show you. Okay, this is another site that parents use, BrainPop, and BrainPop has content for children in English and Spanish. But something the parents said was that BrainPop has videos, so most of the content is presented through videos, so their concern was that my child is not reading, he's watching cartoons and learning from the cartoons, but they felt that, I mean, there's different perspectives that parents bring to what is valuable as a tool for learning. So it was interesting, although the content was appropriate for them, they had okay, I want my child to read books, and this website has books. So they really appreciated being able to read books online. Okay, so the website is here. Okay, these are.
And Sylvia, I think that reinforces your suggestion at the beginning that we're working with adults, we're working with learners and not making decisions for them. And as parents, they have their own ideas about what education can be and should be. And oftentimes people working from a deficit model think that, immigrant parents or adult learners as parents kind of need to be taught how to be a parent. Right? And that's not the case. They don't need to be taught how to be a parent, right? But they need access to particular resources or particular sets of skills, and they have their own ideas about being a parent, and they're grounded in their own experience and in their own culture.
Exactly. And for them, even though the International Children's Library didn't have like a comprehension test at the end, because the website the children were supposed to be using had a lot of quizzes and vocabulary lessons, they said in this website I can find books from my country, which for them was part of that goal of cultural transmission and socialization, socializing the children into the language, but also culturally relevant books. So for them, that was very, very relevant. So I guess these are just some lessons learned, and there's so much data in this project and just ideas that parents have shared. But something we found helpful, me and the family specialists have done presentations in schools in the state about this, that it's important that technology classes for this purpose are in the primary language of the students, and this is why the language of the interface is so relevant, that Google is doing such a good job translating navigation tools and just having interfaces and menus in their home language. And also that translating tools or translated content is not enough, because it may not be cultural and linguistically appropriate. And another issue we found is that many websites translated to Spanish were translated in Spain, and that's a different language variety. So it's not the same language variety that the people we have in the courses speak. So some of the academic vocabulary in Spanish is going to be unfamiliar, and they may actually be more familiar with the English words than the words used in Spain. And the third part is just having access to these platforms in mobile devices. The question I keep getting when I present something to parents is like, is there an app for that? And is the app free? Because I'm not going to look at it for this in a computer, because the computer doesn't work, or the computer doesn't have internet access. So I've worked with some parents that have Android phones, and I'm pretty impressed of how it's very easy to customize and to manage content in Android phones. I think iPhones are very restrictive in how you get content. You have to buy content, and the other problem we've had is that to set what is it called, App Store account, you need a credit card. And some people don't have a credit card. A lot of people don't. And if you don't have a credit card, then it's very hard to set it up, to go around that, just to have access to free apps. Because even if you're not going to spend your money in a free app, you still have to fill out a lot of information about your favorite color and the place that you spend the summers in, like all these questions for privacy. You have to fill that information out, unless if you don't do that, you don't get access to the App Store. So again, there's all these issues that I'm noticing, like how biased these interfaces are and how we need to work together to get around these obstacles.
Right, and in that way, not only are translation tools not a substitute for the content, but the technology is not a substitute for the teacher.
Exactly. Or just having somebody working alongside with you and listening to you on what it is that matters to you, and respecting your decisions, not to give information out, not to share your real name, not to share your birthday. I mean, so many people say, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, well, we'll figure another way to do it. But if schools are saying, or teachers are saying, well, we need your child to engage in these activities, how can we come to a middle ground where we can agree to something that's mutually agreeable? Like, for example, signing a media release and letting your child's photo be in the internet. I mean, parents are very concerned about the likeness of their children existing online. I mean, those are, again, issues of privacy, surveillance, what happens when you're in undocumented status and your picture is all over the internet.
Right. I always I have a fake default birthday that I always use for whenever I'm going to go online, and so I can remember. I always use the same fake birthday. Helene's pointing that out as well. So rather than like trying to remember which fake birthday I came up with for which site, I just came up with a a standard fake birth date that I could come up with. And you can do that for, for other parts of the sign-in as well. I think if you come up with kind of a default thing, but then you, as you pointed out earlier, if you got online with one person and they created a fake thing for you, but you don't remember which fake one you used, then you can't get back to that site.
Exactly. And that's very, very frequently an issue that people rely on somebody else, and then we have to go over opening a new Gmail account, and then in your phone. And that's when, I guess, a blessing and a curse of your smartphone, that it will remember everything for you.
Right.
So you don't have to use your password again. So many people know their Facebook password is in the phone, but they can't do it through the computer. And some of the privacy settings in Facebook are much easier to control in a computer interface. In your phone, you cannot decide, before it was more difficult. So that's another issue of what can I do in my phone versus what can I do in the computer, and can I do it if I don't know my password?
Right.
Okay. So should I go back to the questions, or I guess
sure.
We're running out of time.
Yeah. So it's the top of the hour, or getting close to the top of the hour. So maybe you want to put the questions back up as a way to.
Yeah, I guess the question were just, what criteria is important for you if you said, well, I'm going to include this website in my teaching, in my classroom, working. What are criteria? What is information that you think you would want to know, or would be important for you to include a website?
Right. So we've already mentioned navigation, ease of navigation, the language that's being used. Your parents pointed out whether it's free, what kind of access it is. So are there any other things that people would like to add? I'm thinking about what criteria that your students have told you directly, or that you have developed as a web user yourself. And then also any other kind of general thoughts about how we help parents from diverse communities, diverse immigrant communities, kind of make sense of the technological resources that are out there. Helene notes, one criteria is the ability to get hard copies printed, preferably customizable, right? So yes, so when you want to download that PDF or print something, how easy is it to print that PDF? And do you have to print the whole thing? Can you print parts of it?
Yes.
That's a big issue.
I think that's very important. And that's something that I like that Coloring Colorado does, because they have a lot of PDFs that show, like, the website. People want to have a copy they can highlight and they can work with directly with their hands. And I guess something I also wanted to show really quickly was something new I found in Gmail, because email is something, so important that, where is my window? Oh, here it is. So I found that the Gmail has this new tool, which is like a language tool. So if you're writing an email and you have your English interface or Roman language interface, you can actually insert, if I download it here, Arabic. So I can write Arabic or Mandarin, and I can switch across writing systems. This wasn't there before.
Yeah.
But for example, with Arabic, I didn't know that, where's the pencil? That you could actually try to write the symbols, and then it'll recognize them for you, and it'll put them in the email.
That's cool.
So I can find, even if I don't recognize, or my keyboard doesn't have this, I can just add them. So that's something I saw that I had no idea was there. So it's you can add languages to this and writing systems.
That's great. That would be really important in Chinese or Japanese, where the symbols, the kanji, can be read several different ways. And so you may know what the kanji looks like, but you may not know actually how it's read. So theoretically, you could, draw the symbol and then have it recognize the symbol because you couldn't write it out phonemically. Yeah,
it's so interesting. And I'm thinking, just because we have so many immigrants coming from countries where Arabic is the writing system, and sometimes they may not have a device that has an Arabic keyboard.
Right.
So this will actually add an Arabic keyboard for you, because I've had students from China whose computers are all set up and they go back and forth the writing systems. But if we're working with immigrants from those countries, then we can work together. And I think it could be a useful tool also for literacy. I mean, I don't know Arabic, so I have no idea how it works, but I thought it was really interesting.
Right. Sydney asked a question about whether there are good websites for enunciating words in Spanish and English. So sort of moving from Spanish to English so that the students can hear pronunciation in each language.
This is something it's taken me a long time to learn, is that I found so many websites, but something a teacher told me is it's easier to use the websites that are more common and easily to find. So with the parents, even though we explore things like Duolingo, I think that the Google Translate tool is just so easy because it's already part of their Gmail account. So when they open the translator with their Gmail in another tab, they will be able to create their personalized dictionaries, and they can listen to the sentences.
Yeah.
So if I write, and even though there are so many sites, I think when parents realize that they can use their same Gmail account to save phrases, so if I say something like, ¿Cuál es la calificación? And then, which is, okay, this is not accurate. This is actually, what is the grade? But I can hear it. And the audio is actually really good. I mean, it sounds like a robot, but sometimes, but it has good, the pronunciation is accurate. And I think the app, it's a Google Translate app. It works very well in Android phones because Androids are, they're more friendly with Gmail, the Gmail system. So we've had a good, they really appreciated listening, especially to the English in Google Translate, because you can enter the phrases yourself. And then if I can save with this little star here, I can save the phrases, and it creates a phrase book for you. And then when you revisit the phrase book, you can listen to the phrases again. So this is what I've been using with them. And everybody has like a spreadsheet that goes to Google Drive, because use Google Drive for PowerPoints, and we use everything in our project is in Google Drive, just because it's so easy, and everybody has it, and everybody has a Gmail. So whenever I see a new tool that you have to register again and get another password, I just go like, oh God, no, please no, because then there's so many different passwords, and the Gmail, Google is very flexible with going across languages. I found, at least. That's a resource I personally like, and the parents like.
Dina points out that dictionary.com also has a pronunciation feature that has like a little speaker icon. And Helene likes the Duolingo translations. She thinks that they sound pretty good as well.
Wonderful.
There's also, I know that in California, the state had a website that has lots and lots of English pronunciation. There's a number of, like, the EL Civic site, I think, has some of that. And I think in New York City, they've got the city sponsored its own ESL program, and it's got videos and things like that, and you can listen to those programs.
Yes, each state has different resources, and what I find interesting is just how can they save it, so it's not just that they're listening to it, but there's a way they can start categorizing or creating an audio dictionary, because sometimes people have their personal dictionaries in their notebook, but now the challenge is to curate information, not necessarily to retrieve it, because there's so many resources. It's more, how do I make it my own and organize it in a way I can easily get back to it, because they go to a website, get a password, and then if they have like all the links, dictionary.com, or let me show you Symbaloo. I mean, there's just so many things, but Symbaloo is a useful tool for curating content. So that way it's curated, so you can organize your links in these little icons. And I've seen a lot of ESOL teachers doing this, because that way the parents just put the link, or the students just put the link in their phone or in their computer, and all of their links are organized in something that looks like pretty much a smartphone screen. So Symbaloo is really useful, again, because now the challenge is, where do I put everything so I can have it readily available? And the icons are graphic based. I mean, they're not links with letters, but they're pictures.
Right. So Melissa had asked about using these sites to help teach parents English, since you can switch back and forth. It seems like that's part of the whole process is you know, if they're using this technology, but they're also learning English as they're going along.
Yes, and that wasn't like a goal because when I was working with a school, they had an ESOL class a different day. So they came to different courses different days. So it was a computer class, a GED class, and the ESOL class. But we were constantly trying to connect across, and I collaborated with the other instructors, trying to make sure we kind of reinforce what we were doing and support each other goals. Because in real world, I mean, everything's kind of together, and even though there's different subjects and emphasis, there's an overarching goal.
Right. All right, so we're over the hour. I think we can hang around for a few more minutes, but I think that last question was kind of getting to the heart of what you said at the beginning, is not coming from a deficit model, but working, with the learners, working with the adults. What do they want to learn? What do they already know? And thinking critically about the technology, and not just kind of like accepting it kind of deterministically that, oh, if you give the student the technology, that everything's going to be taken care of. Right? How are they going to use it? Why are they going to use it? These sorts of things are really important, and the only way you know that is by having conversations with your students, right? And not making these assumptions. So any last minute questions or thoughts from folks? Again, we'll be sending out the PDF and some of the list of some of these websites. I'd like to thank Sylvia for sharing this, and this is the first webinar of the season, so it's a little bit later start than we usually have, but I think we're going to have a good season as well.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. I really enjoyed it, and I like the radio form. It sounds like you're in a radio show, so I really like having the voice conversation.
Yeah. Dina points out that there are programs to help low-income populations purchase technology. Yeah, maybe that would be a good thing that we could try to collect, is maybe in different cities or towns in New Jersey, certainly, what some of these ones are. Dina points out National Service, National Service. Is that a U or I, Dina? And then Give, and then Resiris. So we can send out some of this information as people get it.
Yeah, and we had something like that with the school, that they gave away refurbished computers. It's something to keep in mind, is how to help people find help when these don't work, because sometimes this is used equipment or refurbished equipment. Or something we faced was that they had a free operating system that wasn't Windows. It was like an open source software, and people had no idea what to do. So maybe just having together with or planning ahead when having people go to get low cost resources, where to go to get help when things don't work, because it's very often that they don't know how to figure out something.
Right. All right, any other last minute thoughts?